So before we begin, it is important for us to acknowledge our privilege residing on stolen land as the children of immigrants and settlers. We feel grateful to have been asked to gather with your St. Mary's Academy community, which is on Treaty 1 territory, land of the Anishinaabe, Oji-Cree, Dakota, Dene people, and the heart and homelands of the Métis Nation. So today you've invited us to talk about how to communicate with your teenager. We're going to cover tools, tips, and insights on how to connect and build a supportive relationship.
So by the end of our session today, we want you to be able to walk away with a few of the pieces up on the slide here. So particularly to start, how to create a safe space for your teen to open up, tips for how to respond appropriately, and why it's never too late to connect. If you're feeling distracted, I'm seeing that everyone's pretty attentive. I'm also aware that we're like a pretty device-driven creatures, so we want you to get the most out of this time. So we want to create some invitation now. If your phone isn't already on Do Not Disturb, turn that on, or silent mode, just to shut off any distractions. We are not teachers, so we won't be taking away cell phones. We understand that life is happening outside of this space today, so just wanting to minimize any distractions. But of course, you're welcome to have your devices with you.
Okay, and if you're not sure if you're in the right place, we're going to show you a quick video just to get started and see if anything at all resonates with you. Yeah.
Okay, from the lovely Tina Fey.
Yes.
And let's try that again.
An office crush, because you just like having a teenage daughter is like having an office crush, because you just like always like you're thinking about them a lot more than they're thinking about you, and you just like go up to their door and you're like, a bunch of us are gonna eat dinner. You're probably busy. I thought it would be cool to like put a movie. Never mind. And they just look at like they're like looking at their phone. Like,
yeah. Can you just move on?
yeah.
Okay, resonate for anybody? Yeah, I heard some chuckles. Great. All right. So the key piece that we want to start with today is some of the expectations of having a teenager, and particularly as told by the media. More precisely, we want to really focus on how normal it is to have expectations around what you thought having a teen might be like. Oftentimes our expectations can end up being very different than the reality of things. So I'm curious to know, we can skip on show of hands, but just maybe taking this in internally, how many of you have had or heard one or more of the expectations of being a parent? So to start, you may have heard some of these things already. First one is, your teen will have a very similar high school experience to the one that you had, particularly through academics, in their friendships, with dating, in sports, their personal interests, with gender identity, sexuality, in their decision making, or with pressures from their peers. The next expectation that sometimes we get from the media before having teens is that your teenager is going to be your best friend, and you're going to do everything together, and they're going to come to you with their needs, and they'll always be open about sharing their lives and their feelings. Just, it's going to be good. You may have also heard that they'll always appreciate and respect your advice, and you will always respond with the perfect thing to say. Yeah, I'm hearing some chuckling. You may have also heard that the more present you are in their life, it'll take away from any struggle that they might have, which means that they won't ever experience any hardship.
So you're totally in the right place if you want to cover the reality. And so allow us to ease your mind with a bit of a reality check. So the reality is effort doesn't always equal a perfect and close bond. And your relationship doesn't always determine how open and honest someone will be with you, particularly your teenager. The reality is, even if they love and trust you, it doesn't always mean that they will want to come to you and be vulnerable and talk to you about maybe difficult topics or what they're going through.
Yeah.
And someone just said this earlier, the reality is teens tend to turn to their peers or their phones more often than their family members. So we are so glad you're here. If you found yourself feeling curious about any of these expectations versus reality topics, you are 100% in the right place. So we just kind of want to open it up. You don't have to share if you don't want to, but just kind of thinking like, what is going on with you and your family? How about when we take things personally? For example, it feels quite personal when our teenagers choose to lie instead of coming to us with the truth. So we just want to keep going with that in mind. And a bit more food for thought. How can we talk about parenting without thinking about how we ourselves were parented?
Yeah, I was saying to Brittany yesterday evening when we were running through the slides that I used this line twice this week in practice, and it really hit home. So if you're feeling something in your heart or questions are coming up for you, normalizing that as well. So before we go any further, feels like a good time for introductions. Now that we have your attention, I'm Nicole, and I'm an executive assistant and student therapist at Positive Perspectives. I'm currently in my 6th year as a marriage and family therapy graduate student at the University of Winnipeg. I've practiced in practicum placements from Women's Health Clinic to the University of Winnipeg Campus Wellness Center and Aurora Family Therapy. I'm also neurodivergent, and I exist in all of these roles with the help of my beautiful ADHD brain. I want to make sure that I'm creating space for this piece as well, that I navigate the world in a mixed race body. And with one of my parents being South Asian and the other having European backgrounds, the lens I've been gifted with in this lifetime has allowed me to see diversity in culture and language and all of the different perspectives that we have as a result of those systems, and it's a thing of beauty. I'd like to locate myself in this space as an English-speaking South Asian European mixed race, cisgendered heterosexual woman with able-bodied and light skin privilege. Happy to be here.
And I'm Brittany. My pronouns are she, her. I'm also mixed race and a cisgender woman. I'm a registered social worker, and I have been in the field of social work for about 10 years. My work in counseling has let me have the privilege of working with a range of folks and ages from early teens to well into their 70s. And I've been able to expand my role as a therapist with Positive Perspectives. So I've been with Positive Perspectives since May of last year. So just a little note on housekeeping too, like if you have a question, please feel free to ask us. But we also want you to know that we plan to honor your time today, and we'll have a lot of time at the end for questions.
Okay. All right, so moving right along. We've mentioned the word safe space. It was a part of the reason that we were asked to come and present for you folks today. What is a safe space? Well, a good place to start is by defining that. And so after a quick Google search and conversation among therapists, we're happy to present to you that a safe space is a place or environment in which a person or category of people can feel confident that they won't be exposed to discrimination, criticism, harassment, or any other emotional or physical harm. For example, school must be a safe space for 2S LGBTQIA+ and BIPOC students. The reality is that we cannot always feel calm and settled at all times. We're not here today to shame the limits of your parenting, and you made it here today. And that's already a huge part of you wanting to create safe spaces for your kids. Today we invite you to lean in with curiosity and compassion, and please be mindful that if you're not able to hold up to that end of the bargain, you can always reach out for support, and we'll be touching on that later today.
So we thought this was really important. Think about what makes you feel safe to open up. And please consider that what your teen thinks is a safe space can certainly differ from what feels like a safe space for you. So we want to take a moment to talk about a lot of nuance here. For instance, Nicole and I do not have teenagers, but we were teenagers. So we're just coming from kind of our lens here on what we want to share.
Yeah.
But in thinking about nuance here, we have to consider things such as cultural differences, generational differences, gender, neurodiversity, adaptive ways of being, and what feels safe for one person may differ from the next person. And that's just a small snippet there. But when I talk about nuance here, I'm thinking about, say, the difference between what I experienced as a safe space in my home growing up. And so in my family home, when I was a teenager, talking about emotions was not the norm. So that was actually what felt safer to me. So imagine me going into spaces where we're talking about emotions. I distinctly remember a grade 5 or 6 friendship club developed because our girls needed that very much. That was very different from what I experienced at home, and talking about feelings was very encouraged. So when I was younger, that actually felt unsafe to me, but as you can see, I've been able to overcome and embrace that to be where I am today. So just keeping that in mind for, what we might say up here today as a safe space in your particular family with your particular child, they might feel very differently. But that's why we want to kind of keep these things in mind on the topic of creating safety and just thinking of the implications for how people define or even expect or don't expect spaces to feel safe. And so we might have to generalize some of these topics for the sake of time. In fact, we had a very hard time just narrowing down what we wanted to focus on. But we just invite you to take in any information that feels relatable to you, leave the rest, and then, yes, we're going to give you our contact information after if you want to dive in deeper a little bit.
Okay, so before we continue, it feels imperative to address parent shame. There's no universal manual for parenting at any stage, as I'm sure you already all understand, and you and your kids are figuring it out as you go. So your teens are figuring out how to be a teen for the very first time, and you're figuring out how to be a parent to your specific teen for the first time. And we're here as a reminder today to remind you that it starts with you. And I want to ask, how can you create a safe space for yourself and feel as regulated as possible in stressful circumstances? Can you learn to communicate if you need to pause and take a break instead of just walking away and leaving a conversation without the openness of repair? And I want to add that I was raised in a home where repair was not always common after ruptures. And because it wasn't modeled to me, I learned what it looked like and what it felt like in therapy. So learning how to repair after conflict doesn't just happen in one day. It doesn't just happen by showing up today. We applaud you for being here, but we really want to let you know that this is a continuing practice, and it's okay if you're not getting it right off the hop. So you might have come here today for a list of things to say or strategies to use to better understand your teenager, and we're going to get to some of those, but we talked about it and we couldn't effectively communicate those things without really acknowledging that when we're not regulated, our teen may not be feeling safe.
Okay, so we want to normalize a little bit here. So first, we just want to normalize that we are human, and as humans, we can have emotional responses to just simple day-to-day situations. Emotional responses often happen quite quickly, and if we are reactive, it can lead to ruptures. So Nicole just touched on ruptures, but an example of a rupture could be a scenario where you're at the end of a busy week, you've had a lot of demands on you, a long day, you can feel irritation climbing, you threw together what you thought was a nice meal, whatever, and your teen pops into the kitchen and says, like, meatloaf or chicken or whatever for dinner again, gross, and just a flippant comment, but that could just be all it takes. Your anger's on display, it takes the form of yelling at your teenager in the kitchen, like, you are so rude, you are so ungrateful, what is wrong with you? They could scream back at you, they could storm out. Yeah, it happens. But this is where a repair comes in. So what is a repair?
Yeah.
Growing up, I certainly learned about apologies, say sorry to your brother, but I did not have the knowledge then to know what a repair was like. So in order to learn how to repair, we have to talk about what repairs are not, and they are different from apologies. So apologies sound like, I'm sorry, can you please forgive me? I didn't mean to upset you. Those are not repairs though. Repairs are also not, hey, I'm sorry you're upset. Can you get over this? When are you going to change your attitude? Are you still mad about that? Fix your face. It's gonna get stuck like that. It's gonna get stuck like that. Cheer up. Can you just smile? Okay, so now that we've clearly stated what repairs are not, let's learn how to repair. So step one, we need to repair with ourselves. So in those moments when you have an emotional reaction, reactivity took over, you have to offer yourself some compassion and some groundedness or understanding before you access those qualities to give to someone else. You have to tune into yourself and give that to yourself first. So that means really separating your identity, who you are, from your behavior, what you did. So the yelling at the teen is the behavior. Being here today, learning, reaching out for help, doing all the things that you do on a regular basis, that's your identity. One part of your identity is your role as a parent. Repair takes the form of a few steps, so just three small steps. One, name what happened. 2, take responsibility. And 3, state what you could do differently for the next time. So just to touch back to that example, hey, I keep thinking about what happened the other night. I'm sorry I yelled at you. That must have felt unfair and could have scared you. It wasn't your fault that I was stressed out. I'm working on staying calm and managing my irritation.
Easy, right?
I never heard an apology or repair like that.
No.
But it's much easier to access when you can type out steps 1, 2, 3 and accordingly fill in the blanks. So we just want to normalize that. Your initial reaction to your teen could be fear, presented as anger, or just straight to anger before you even acknowledge the fear, especially when your child is dealing with something that's difficult and comes to talk to you about it. It's also important to normalize experiences like, okay, when I was a teenager, the last person that I wanted to talk to was my parents for several reasons, maybe fear of shame, fear of punishment, fear of disappointing them, not wanting to break the trust, which I see the irony there. But if your kid isn't talking to you, just remember some of the people that they could be talking to are their friends, their siblings maybe, teammates, resources at school, guidance counselors, teachers, maybe they have a cool aunt or uncle, so a sibling of yours. So it's not to say that they're not talking to anyone. That's also where Nicole and I can come in. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But we also need to normalize that lying can and does often happen in family dynamics. Lying can happen when there's been a rupture without repair, or lying in response to very strong emotional responses. Often when a teen is trying to avoid strong emotional responses, they may lie as well. And when put on the spot, sometimes teens aren't wanting to open up verbally or be as honest. So it's normal to consider different means of communication. So talking, yes, is one, but there's also writing, seeking closeness or distance, or bonding through a shared activity. A lot of times teens will open up doing something with you rather than, hey, let's sit down face to face, like tell me what's going on with your life. They might just open up when they feel safe to do so. So again, tying it back to that safe spaces. And we wanted to also touch a bit on communication because that was mentioned. So we have to note body language. Recognizing something like crossed arms could signal someone is closed off, yes, maybe, or they're cold. That's me all the time. Or they're just more comfortable standing or sitting that way. Standing up here, what do I do with my hands, Taking note of facial expressions, body postures, gestures, that is important because those convey messages as well. But in order to listen to body language, we have to also consider tone of voice and words. Words are just a small part of communication though. Tone, the pacing of a conversation, the volume, and the body language, so what is not said, means a lot. Consistency from all three is important. Words, body language, and how we say something. So if I'm standing up here and I'm saying, I'm not nervous and I'm shaking like a leaf and sweat dripping down, you're not really going to believe me. So we have to just check in. Key piece here is just not to assume. Use your curiosity and compassion to check in. And when talking about nonverbal communication, we can look at the things that someone isn't saying, but also tuning into changes in behavior. So it's certainly normal for teens to go through some changes as they mature, a lot of changes. But pay attention if you notice things like their mood really shifting, behavior, energy level, appetite. Take note if they stop wanting to do things that used to make them happy or bring them joy, or if you notice them really isolating. So seeing a change in your teen's daily ability to function can be very scary, but you want to try to stay open still, open, curious, ask them about it, be supportive without being judgmental. And they may need your help, they may want to open up to you, but they also may be more comfortable opening up to someone else. So this could be the sign that they need to talk to a counselor, a therapist, a mental health professional. Anyway, to summarize this normalized slide, we just want to say there's a lot of space for differences, a lot of space for nuance. There's going to be a lot of different personalities. Even within your home, your kids could have such completely different personalities. Things like neurodivergence, things like cultural norms, Asian family, let's not talk about our emotions. But if we're trying to read someone and assume, we might miss out on the opportunity to be an open and active listener.
Okay, so key piece here, don't underestimate the power of just sitting with your teen in their pain and in their grief. And we want to even expand that further on just a human level. Don't underestimate the power of just being with people. You don't always have to have the perfect thing to say or be doing the perfect thing. Just creating a space where you're ready and able and your presence is open for them is a lot. Okay, so here comes the fun part. We know you all came here for a reason, so you're welcome to take notes. I know I said to put your phones away. You're welcome to take those out again. So the reason that you're here is to look at some of these action items and figure out, well, what is it that I actually can do or say? We took the, suggestions that came to us when putting together the presentation and put together our own list of things that we've said to folks or maybe we've heard, and in working with teens from our experience, what's been helpful. So the first thing that you can say, the first thing that you can do is to be curious. So stay open, ask questions, remember to do that without judgment if you can. I know it's really hard. We want the best for our kids. You can also be mindful of making assumptions based on your own experiences. So going back to those expectations that we touched on earlier, know that our kids are not going to have the exact same high school experience with a whole wide list of things. We're living in very different times here. We were talking to a couple folks before the presentation today, and even things like social media can be a big context difference. The other thing is to notice if you're in convincing mode versus connection mode. And so we're going to be referencing, one of our fave therapists, doctors, that really gets into this. We'll have some resources later for future learning, but just again, like acknowledging, am I in convincing mode or am I in connection mode? Some things you can ask your teens is, do you want advice or do you just want to vent? I know that this has been shared with me before, and holy smokes, was that helpful. Particularly when you're coming to someone who typically is the advice giver, and you don't really want advice right now, you just need someone to kind of hear you out. You could also say, can I give you a hug? Okay, thanks. That can also be this really great point of connection, and even further than that, it creates this thing called co-regulation, where another settled body can find connection, and we get to have this innate feeling of safety. Think of when you're little kids, or think of when your kids were little kids, or when they were babies, or something really regulating about a hug and how that can solve a lot of the problems in the moment. You can also say, I love you. Growing up in my house, I don't know how many times I heard that, particularly in the era of repair. Sometimes that reminder can be really, really important when it's timed well. Another thing you could say is, there's nothing you could tell me that would make me love you any less. This can be before something happens, but just reminders to offer that to your kids. When it comes to the trust factor, our kids are probably pretty scared. I mean, I was really scared to go to my parents with stuff. We've all been teenagers before. We know that feeling of not wanting to let them down or getting grounded or being punished for something, but those are really great reminders to be able to offer to your teens. Another one, your feelings are valid. Oh, that feels really nice to hear. Yeah. The other piece here is that it doesn't have to make sense. If you have the opportunity to sit with your teen and they're in a place where they're really confused or they're holding on to two spaces, say we're talking about relationships and dating or conflict with friends, this doesn't have to make sense. It's okay that we sit in the confusion of this. At Positive Perspectives, we talk a lot about the duality of different experiences and how you can be really happy about something and also at the same time hold space for grief. I'm proud of you. How good does that feel? I don't know if any of you grew up hearing, I'm proud of you, I love you, but just getting those affirmations from someone that you really strive to have respect and care from can mean a lot. The other thing you can say is, I'm here and I'll be here. That also leaves the door open for down the road. I hear you and I see you. I want to be mindful here that we're also backing up those sentiments, because what we don't want to do is create an open door, and then when our kids do feel vulnerable and they trust us enough to come to it, we're shutting the door and maybe going back on our word. You are enough and you have nothing to prove. So the piece here is that we're focusing on compassion, we're focusing on care, we're focusing on continuing to create open spaces. If you have had one of your kids come to you and make a disclosure, or you might notice that they came to you and said something that was really hard for them, just empathize, reflect their sentiments back, say, wow, that really sounds difficult. Again, you don't have to have the right thing to say, just be with them in that space. So we've been talking about how being regulated is an important part of effectively communicating with our teens. And in the spirit of practicing new things, because you've all come here on a Saturday morning, I'd like to invite you to practice in a regulating activity with me. And you don't have to do anything or go anywhere. You can stay where you're sitting. And so I'm going to plant my 2 feet on the ground, because that's what helps me kind of ground, feel the floor, root myself to the space. Thanks, everybody, for doing it with me. And I'd like to invite you to breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower. Breathe out through your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. Do that a couple times. It's okay if it makes noise. Breathe in through your nose like you're smelling a flower. Out through your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. Nice. Let's do it all together one more time. In through your nose, out through your mouth. I know for me, I felt my shoulders drop. And notably, there's a lot of energy in this room, so I was feeling a little jittery coming up here, but I do feel a lot more grounded. I could feel my heart space drop in and feel just a little bit more calmer. It's something that you can take with you. Again, another great tool, no matter how old you are, whether you're a toddler that understands what smelling a flower and blowing out a candle is, or you're in this space as a parent, it's effective. So I welcome you to take that one with you in your toolkit. So if some of these examples don't feel attainable, if your teen isn't coming to you and there isn't a lot of space to be able to say these really lovely and beautiful things to them, we also want to leave you with some mantras that you can try, that you can hold on to in those times where the dinner situation happens and we're feeling our anger come up. Maybe we forgot to take that breath, but you can remind yourself, she's not giving me a hard time, she's having a hard time. I think that one would really land. Would have worked for my parents, I think. The calmer I am, the more effective I'll be. And be patient with yourself here, because you're likely trying really hard. This probably feels like a really big deal for her. Another one that's good. Help, don't hurt, I can do this. Flower, birthday candle. So if you don't feel like you're able to say or do these things, please know that it takes incredible self-awareness to even recognize that about yourself and to be in this space. This can be where reaching out for outside support can be really helpful. We have a helpful list of resources that we'll provide with you a little bit later and ways to connect with us and our team as well. Okay.
Can you repeat those mantras? I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
Can you repeat those mantras?
All of them?
Well, the first one was...
Sure.
Yeah, first one's
Yeah, the first one. She's not giving me a hard time, she's having a hard time. Yeah. The calmer I am, the more effective I'll be. We'll make sure that these slides are accessible for all of you folks. Also aware that this is being recorded, but we're also welcome for questions and helpful to provide resources moving forward as well. Thank you for your question. Okay, so if we want to create a safe space for our kids to open up, we can create an environment that minimizes those fears. We can't take away the fears of our kids. I know that's not parent, but I can imagine that's a really, really difficult part of being a parent. It's having that lack of control over what's going on with our kids. So it's less about changing or fixing our teens, and it's more about what and how we communicate. And I hope by this point you're starting to gather that. So if you're a strategy person, we've broken it down here. The strategy is to be curious. You can stay open, and the key part here is to notice your own reactions. And it comes back to us. That's really what we want the take-home piece to be. It's so important to remember that it's not what we know, and it's how we make our kids feel. So if they feel safe with us, we're going to be a non-judgmental presence to them. And when they share a struggle or a challenge, we're not going to come in and quickly criticize or tell them that they did it wrong. It's less about changing or fixing them, as I said. Again, it's more about how and what we communicate. So if we don't feel safe, we don't connect. And I'm even speaking from personal experience. If I don't feel like I'm in the presence of someone that's that I can trust them, or that I'm feeling calm and regulated, I'm not going to reach out. I'm not going to make a disclosure. I'm not going to tell them what's going on with me. So I want you to think about someone in your own life that maybe you don't connect with regularly because you felt criticized or judged. Just want you to, you've probably already thought about the person, but just think about them, hold on to that. Are you going to share your heart with that person if something really big is going on in your life? Yeah, probably not. I wouldn't. And it's the same with our kids. So we're typically in that space, we're going to self-protect because we don't want to receive criticism when things are already feeling really hard.
So just to bring it back to Dr. Becky Kennedy again, she's the clinical psychiatrist that we were talking about. Psychologist, sorry. She says it's never too late to reconnect. To dive in a little bit here. This brings us back to repair. So going back to a moment of disconnection, taking responsibility for your behavior, and acknowledging the impact it had on another person. So she says a repair opens one up. It allows for reconnection. It stops the child, the teenager, from going into this mode of self-blame, and instead it focuses on self-trust, safety, and connection. Those things that we've just been talking about all morning. Mm-hmm. It changes to love and goodness as the story, something that is very, very important, rather than the teen walking away thinking something's wrong with me. I make bad things happen. I'm unlovable. These are core adult fears that result from those childhood stories where events went unrepaired. And adults with self-blame are more vulnerable to depression, maybe, anxiety, deep feelings of worthlessness. Those can come up. And so in adulthood, the impact of prioritizing repair can look like your adult child knowing how to take responsibility for their behavior. They don't go into this spiral mode of self-blame when they've made a mistake, and they won't necessarily take on the blame for someone else's mistakes. And these are critical relationship patterns. Repair also teaches regulation, so managing emotions, and effective and respectful communication. So if you get a chance, Dr. Becky Kennedy has an amazing TED Talk called The Single Most Important Parenting Strategy, which is repair. And she goes into an activity with the group. And this is her quote, so it's never too late to reconnect. How do I know? Well, imagine right after this, you get a call from one of your parents, and if neither of your parents are alive, imagine finding and opening a letter that you hadn't seen till that moment. She says, okay, walk through this with me. Here's the call. Hey, I know this sounds out of the blue, but I've been thinking a lot about your childhood. And I think there were a lot of moments that felt really bad to you. And you were right to feel that way. Those moments weren't your fault. They were times when I was struggling, and if I could have gone back, I would have stepped aside, I would have calmed myself down, and then found you to help you with whatever you were struggling with. I'm sorry. And if you're ever willing to talk to me about any of those moments, I'll listen. I won't listen to have a rebuttal, I'll listen to understand. I love you.
Chills.
And so she goes on to say, if you have a child, that child is younger than you. Fact. The story of their life is shorter and even more amenable to editing.
Yeah.
So if that just imagined exercise had an impact on you, imagine the impact an actual repair will have on your child. And she says, see, I told you, it's never too late.
Okay. So we mentioned that there'd be a list of resources. Again, we'll be sure that these slides get out to you. The first thing to note here is that our website, I'm proudly the keeper of our website, and so we keep up with a lot of the new local resources. If you're looking for Winnipeg or Manitoba or even Canadian resources, we vouch for all of them off of our website. So there'll be, I think there's QR codes and cards on all of the tables. You just hover your phone over there. When you open to take a picture, that's how QR codes, right? Okay. You should just see our link pop up. So you're welcome to take those home. You're welcome to scan those. Our website has been an incredible resource for folks, and so you're welcome to take a peek there. Some other places we want to highlight are Clinic with a K, the Rainbow Resource Center, and there's also a new text line. I don't know if everyone's heard of it, but if you text 988, we have this service in Canada now where you can receive help for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This service offers trauma-informed and culturally affirming support to anyone who's worried about someone they know or anyone who's thinking of suicide. There's a couple of other resources up here, particularly those books, The Power of Showing Up by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, Good Inside, A Guide to Becoming the Parent You Want to Be by Dr. Becky Kennedy, who we referenced, and the TED Talk, The Single Most Important Parenting Strategy by Dr. Becky Kennedy. Okay, we're getting close to the end, but we wanted to make space to share our team with you. We're really proud of everybody and happy to be on a team that celebrates so much diversity. And so if you've been curious about reaching out for support with your mental health, maybe these are some of the things you've been thinking or feeling. Maybe you've been more fatigued than usual while at work or at school or in your personal life. If you've been feeling off no matter what you do, if you've been having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep due to constant worries, cute teenagers, increasingly withdrawing yourself from social gatherings, feeling consistent anger or resentment. And this is not just one key person, this is like a generalized feeling of resentment or anger that you just can't shake. If you're in a new stage of life and you're looking for a safe space to share your experiences, if you're ready for a change, or you're looking for a supportive and inclusive space to process your thoughts, and maybe you're just not really sure where to start. You made it here today. That's a really big piece of this. We want to congratulate you for that. So if you're curious about how to find a therapist that would feel like the best fit for your unique needs, whether that's individual, relational, or couples therapy, or family therapy services, we have great news for you because our practitioners are welcoming new guests. So we're going to do a little bit of a humble brag and just celebrate what it is that we love about the practice, because we're here and so are you. So Positive Perspectives was established in 2014 by our founder, Homa Hushmand. She's a private practice psychotherapist, a first-generation Canadian, a woman of color, and a mom to 2 little boys. Since its beginning, the practice has expanded, now with a team of 7 therapeutic associates with diverse designations, from social worker, Canadian certified counselor, to marriage and family therapists. We do accept health coverage. Positive Perspectives exists to carefully and intentionally provide equitable, socially just, and diverse mental health services for our community. So we invite you to stay in touch with us virtually. We are on Instagram if that's your jam. Again, visit our website. We also have a great blog up on there where you can get to know each of our therapists. We really encourage folks when they come to us and reach out for support to have an idea about some of the work that maybe they want to do. Because our team is so diverse, we really pride ourselves on being able to match you with someone that might have experience with your particular concerns, or they're open to exploring that with you. So there isn't just a one-size-fits-all deal when you talk about therapy and mental health services, and we really pride ourselves on creating a diverse space. So we want to invite you to connect with us. Again, like I said, you're welcome to browse our availability online. We have online booking services, or you can just reach out to book a 20-minute no-cost phone consultation so you can just see for yourself if you're a good fit. If you're sending us an email or talking to us on Instagram, it's me on the other end. So hi, I'll make the introduction now. And we look forward to welcoming you into our inclusive, client-centered, and collaborative community.
So, any questions? Did anything resonate with anyone? Tell us.
Yeah.
We want to hear.
And we're not here to provide therapy today, but we do, which feels important to mention. We hope everyone's feeling okay. There's a lot of snacks around, so please feel free to mull around. We'll be here for questions if you feel more comfortable coming up one-on-one. But we would love to open it up to you folks since you came out this morning and see if there's anything that's coming up.
I just want to add one quick thing about online booking that's really accessible, especially if you want to send your teen to look at the website, look at the bios, see who, if they want to talk to someone, if they felt inclined to want to talk to someone in particular. And a really great feature of the booking app is that it can allow you to have parent-child permissions for it. So your child can take the lead on it, but you will be informed, and it'll probably be your credit card on file too.
Thanks, Brittany.
Yeah.
Okay, the dinner example was very, I really related. And so I'm just, how do you react to that? Because you gave the example and then you gave the repair. But, how do you, it happened last night and I was so annoyed because I changed my plans so that I could make the dinner.
Thank you. Co-regulating.
Yeah, and so it makes me so mad when I plan my time to be home to make the dinner when they got home. And then, so how do you react when they come home and say?
How did you react? If you feel inclined to share.
There's a lot of ways parallel.
I basically said, I changed my schedule for the night, had another driver so that I could come home, make the dinner that took me an hour to make, and that's what's dinner. So, and then I left the room.
And valid, because that's all true.
Okay.
Yeah. So you did the best you could, and that's okay.
Well, then she came after. She's like, I'm sorry, do you want to watch TV together? And then I felt really bad. But yeah, I just don't know. What do you say?
Sounds like your kiddo came to you with a repair.
Oh, okay. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And then something that you could have just said in that moment was, I guess, a bit more clarity of okay, I can understand that I overreacted there. I was more upset about I did all these things in my day or my night to make that happen. You couldn't have known that that was happening behind the scenes for me, but when you came in and said that one part about what I've been working on for an hour, it really bothered me. But then you giving that explanation as to like why you had the emotional reaction gives that understanding to your kid that, oh, it wasn't something wrong with me. But actually that's such a great sign that your kid came to you and was like, hey, I'm sorry, can we watch TV together? Because they want to connect with you. And so that's maybe some indirect acknowledgement of, okay, mom's having a tough day. That was not a great scenario. So yeah, even more in depth would have just been like, give your kid some insight of like, hey, this doesn't just happen by magic. I didn't just wave a wand and all this came. I had to buy the groceries, I had to plan the meal prep, I had to do like all these things, and you just get to eat and, you know, not pay for anything and yeah, and have leftovers. So just some insight is helpful, because then they're not walking away thinking like, oh, what did I do, or I'm such a bad kid, or whatever unconsciously goes on. But yeah, to give some greater appreciation to, hey, this is what it takes to make this happen on a Friday night. It's not the thing that I want to be doing tonight either, but not in a way of you're a burden to me. It's just like, okay, this is what it takes, and we're normalizing that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even taking in from what we've shared today, like if you had a magic wand and you could go back, anything that you would do differently? Not to put you on the spot, you're welcome to say no. Skip the dishes. Yeah. Yeah.
Recognizing for yourself, like, oh, okay, all these things happen in my day, my week. Like, what do I actually need tonight? Is it really gonna make or break our relationship if I, order in instead of make dinner, or, you know, what are we both getting out of this? So kind of like, pausing to acknowledge your needs, pausing to do the breathing exercise.
Easier said than done
Easier
in the
said than
moment,
done.
but I appreciate you acknowledging, like, whew, this is still with me, what next?
Yeah. And also too, like, you can still go to your teenager the next day, a few days later, and say, hey, that other night, this is what I would have done differently, or this is, you know, what I've thought about that interaction. Next time I want to respond more like this, or next time I'll give you a heads up if I'm having a hard day, and maybe we can just make a plan to order something together. Yeah.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now the hands are raised. I don't know.
What advice do you have for parents that might be going through a difficult time themselves, or be separating, or blended families and things like that, because you have this child that's genetically connected to you and this other person that you might not be with anymore, and so you have different feelings there too?
My first thought is like best interest of the child always. Like that's where your mind has to go in terms of thinking like co-parenting, especially with someone that's maybe it's going to be a difficult relationship between the two of you for a while, or just challenges navigating it. Trying to see it as we are in the business of raising our children the best way we possibly can. So it takes like the personalization factor away as much as humanly possible, and trying to see it more as like we are in this business together, this is what we are doing. I've even had some folks like try to imagine, oh, okay, so now your ex is seeing someone else. Well, that's free babysitting for you, or free, you know, just services in that way. It's like trying to reframe it is challenging, but that's kind of the place to start. Is you're not trying to see it as like, this is my ex-partner, this is so challenging, because I think one of the mantras Nicole touched on earlier is like, okay, she's not giving me a hard time, she's having a hard time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I
Briefly,
think, yeah. And I think it again, like it comes back to us. So we really can't control what our kids are feeling or experiencing, what it's like to co-parent, if it's really challenging co-parenting with someone. In the context of like separation like you shared. So coming back to yourself, what is it that I might need here? How do I give myself 5 extra minutes so that I can regulate? Because there's not a whole lot you can control, but what you do have control over is how you show up, what goes on in your system, and stress management and all the like. Yeah.
and if that means you need an outlet that's separate,
Yeah.
yeah, by all means, whatever that looks like.
Thank you. A lot of this advice seems very logical and common sense, but I have to admit that teenagers aren't always logical, at least in my experience. And so one of the questions that I have is to avoid a circumstance which you're trying to get a logical conclusion, but the kid's just not getting it. So let's just use a hypothetical. Michelle was kind enough to say that this was what happened in her house. I'm covering this up. This is hypothetical. So you don't want your teenager to bring dishes into their bedroom, and you say, "Can you please remove the dish from your bedroom?" Yep, I'm on it. And then the next day, it's still there, and there's maybe 2 dishes. So, and then the third day. So you don't want to blow up. You don't want to have to deal with the repair. But what do you do in that circumstance, other than maybe go to your room and like scream into a pillow?
Recommend that. That's a great way to allow that anger. Like if you're feeling angry, scream into the pillow. Turn on that old angsty teenage playlist that made you feel some feelings back in the day. I highly recommend that. Finding movement and allowing that anger to surface so that we're not just pushing it down so that it comes up when we don't mean for it to come up is a great thing. But even with connecting with your question, being mindful, am I in convincing mode or connection mode? So back again, yeah, having dishes in your room is really gross and it's gonna start to smell, and I would prefer that these come downstairs. But yeah, maybe getting to the root of like, why isn't this happening? I'm saying something, it's not being delivered, it's not being received, it's not happening again. So kind of coming back with that curiosity. How about for you?
Yeah, I'm thinking of like there needs to be a bit of buy-in too. Like, why is this important to you? So asking, yeah, okay, like the quick response, like stop bothering me, basically. But wanting to like get to the root of like why this will be helpful to you, why this will benefit you, and like you said, it seems so common sense logic, but
Not for teenagers.
no. I remember like. For ages, my brother would just lie about having a shower. And he'll never see this, but he would just run his head under the sink and then like come out and like clearly in pajamas still, and his head would be dripping wet. And my mom would be like, "Did you have a shower?" He'd be like, "Yeah," just look right at her and lie. And it's like, yeah, it's like, how can I convince you that this is important? Really, yeah, just like it's also, yeah, explaining it, trying to get them to see from their lens, like, okay, I were a teenager, like what would be important to me, getting onto their level in that sense. But then also there's just a lot of room for like maturity has to happen too, like emotional maturity needs to kick in.
Yeah. And why is it important to you that those dishes make it downstairs? So like, is this a battle that you need to be picking right now, or are there things that you can actually save that for and, you know, save that superpower stuff for later? I know it's gross. So I want to acknowledge that, but yeah, permission for yourself to let them be nasty teenagers, because they're gonna become our age one day, and yeah.
Then you have stories, and then you say, hey, remember when you did this?
Yeah.
And they're gonna be mortified.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm assuming your brother now showers.
Yes. Yeah.
Success story.
Yeah. Big success. Yeah, that didn't last long, thankfully.
Yeah.
It also came, I think, in the form of it had to be reiterated from someone else.
Yeah.
He wasn't hearing it from her, but sure enough, we had a teacher, I remember, and she just sat us all down. She's like, you guys smell. I don't know what's going on, but you need personal hygiene. These are the things you have to do. And it took place because, hey, here's someone else reinforcing this message in front of your peers.
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of said, like, reality is teens will turn to and be more influenced by their peers, by social media, than by their family. So you could be saying the exact right thing, but just because it's coming from you, it's like, nope, in one ear, out the other, which is frustrating.
Yes.
Yeah.
My 2 teenagers would be the first to say I'm way better with other people's teenagers than I ever was with my own teenagers, because they are of the heart.
Yeah.
And heart equates emotion.
Yeah.
So your point about trying to regulate yourself, like, amen, I wish I'd worked way better at that when my kids were teenagers. However, I did find it helpful that they understood my emotion as well in the midst of the conversation. I hear you with the plates upstairs. In my house, it's not an option because we have mice where we live. So
There you go.
nothing like some mice droppings on a plate. So all of a sudden, oh my God, they've made it up to the second.
Yeah.
Right? So, and where we live, there's so many field mice, we can't be leaving plates around. But when I didn't explain my emotion to the kids, that's when things got more baffled, center. And when I took that deep breath, realizing, especially with my neurodiverse son, like I had to watch how I breathed
Yeah.
for the interpretation of emotion. And I would have to say, I'm really angry right now. Give me 5 minutes and we're gonna talk again.
Yeah.
Because I don't wanna say something I'm gonna regret.
Perfect.
And that gave us time. He got that I was angry. And we both needed space because he was also angry. And then we could come back together. So for me, and I know the point of regulating as an adult, I do it way better with other people's teenagers than mine, but letting them know how I was feeling, I felt was an important piece of that. Bargaining back and forth as we were going through things.
Yeah, and a key piece I want to pull out from the example that you offered, because that's great, is the reason why you need to take that space. I think it's so easy to, I'm even maybe speaking from my own experience, but it's easy to interpret someone walking away from us when they feel angry as so many different reasons why. Kids are really creative and they'll come up with their own reasons why. And so I love that piece that you had about, I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret later. And giving yourself that space, giving themselves that space, you're also modeling to them how they can regulate themselves if conflict comes up. It's like, okay, I know that my parent has done this before and I felt safe going into conversation. They're always watching, whether you believe it or not. Yeah. Thank you.
Not that I did that every time.
No.
Not expected.
So on the flip side of the example that we're talking about for us, to maybe need to take a few minutes to self-regulate what happened. How do you approach the situation if it's your teenage daughter that's like, oh, whatever, and then they just walk away and you're kind of like in the middle of something really important? Not that that ever happened. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, yes.
So your teenage daughter walking away, whatever's going on for her in that moment, if she's up here with her emotions, she's not hearing you anyway.
Yeah.
So you might think, okay, well, if I just follow her and keep talking, maybe. But she's already not listening, so she's already checked out. So you already have that against you. Plus, it's the fact that you're mom, so she's already filtering it through that lens too.
Yeah.
So giving her that space, so kind of like how we mentioned before, there's ability to communicate in some distance too. So give her that, but let her know, hey, I'm still here. I'd still like to talk about this at a later time. Or, just reminding her that just because she stormed away and, rolled her eyes, whatever, you're still going to listen. You're still there. You still love her. You don't need to say it quite like that if that's not accessible to you. But I think, like, as soon as she walks away, there is still that kind of bravado, but also, like, the guilt's coming in, the self-blame's coming in a little bit.
Yeah.
Teenagers react and act, and as they're doing it, they're like, why am I doing this? But they just are already doing it. So when you can come to them with that reassurance of like, hey, I'm still here, like I still want to talk to you about this, we're not done talking about this. I still care. We're not done talking about this, but
Yes.
coming from more of the caring space, it just takes away that shame that could keep her silent or keep her from opening up to you again. Because a lot of that is shame of, like they don't really know why they're acting the way they are. Hormones are crazy, moods are high, whatever happened at school is stressful, and then you get the brunt of it. So for you to continuously be like there and reassuring and open, it just keeps that door open.
So they may not even be able to verbalize what it is they want.
Exactly. They
Just
could
know
be
they're
feeling
gonna
so
come to you
much.
and kind of
Exactly.
be a receptacle, but
Yeah.
so you could actually verbalize, I think this is important. And if it's something we're trying to talk to her about and she walks away, you could say like, we need to revisit this. When would you?
Yeah, or hey, I can
you
see.
do this in an hour or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe set a time frame or something so that it just doesn't end up kind
Yeah, hey, I can see you're really, insert mood feeling there, or whatever might feel not attacking or put her on the defensive. Let's talk about this later.
Yeah.
Just leaving it open. That way you're not feeling stressed too of thinking like, hey, when is it an hour? And then you're like mindful of that, because that's not going to give you space to really relax either.
And being mindful, we can't put times on how regulated, like how long it takes people to feel regulated and safe to come back into a conversation. So when you were talking about like whatever and walking away, I thought of like, well, there's the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so sometimes we actually physically need to remove ourselves from a stressor, and that's the way that we regulate. We go into a place where we can be with our own thoughts and remove ourselves from whatever's going on. So knowing that that might be her response. So talking like, we're going to revisit this, or let's take a break. We're going to come back to this later. Not, how's 3 o'clock for you? And you're doing great. Yeah, you're doing
But I think
great.
that's so important, because I can think of so many times where a rupture happened and then it was just never talked about again. It was like my mom would just act normal later, and I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
It would be back to normal. I'd be like, okay, and then I'm certainly not going to bring it up because I feel ashamed on some level, but yeah, just to keep addressing it, because then it's like, hey, I'm still here. You don't have to act perfectly or like this for me to care about you and for me to be your parent. Seems logical and common sense, but again, teenagers are not logical or common sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any tips? So you talked about how sometimes, we give advice when advice is not what is actually needed.
Yes.
What about when they come to you for advice and your advice just totally doesn't work for them? Like any tips that you might, so like, a big struggle in our house is over what I would characterize as procrastination, the putting things off, the not finishing, not getting things done, whatever. And particularly with one of my children, I feel like we're just so different in how we approach things, like just different in character. Like for me, like planning and focus and all of that is easy. Always has been. Always been able to say, I have a bunch of work to do, I sit down and do work. So,
You have a teenager though.
I was a teenager, and I was like that as an adult. And so any advice that I can provide about strategies that work for me in terms of how to go about like allocating your time or getting things done, like the things that work for me, obviously don't work for my daughter. They don't work at all. She's got more of a mind that goes like, squirrel! And so you have advice to give, you're asked for advice, you give advice, it's singularly unhelpful. And you need to read up about other types of advice, like where do you go from there?
You want me to take?
Yeah, if you have something. Go for it.
You've planted a seed. allow that advice that's been asked of you to land. Your kiddo might not make that change overnight, but know that if they've actually come to you and asked for that advice, or they've come to you with a problem, do you want me to listen or do you want advice here? If there's been that confirmation that they're looking for your opinion and advice, you've planted a seed. It happens a lot in therapy. There's a lot of things that people aren't ready to hear yet, and there's a lot of change that needs to be made in order for behavior to flip into something that might work more effectively, particularly with productivity. So know that you can remain open. You can ask, like, do you want to check in with me? Like, thank you for coming to me with this question. I'm always here. Like, keep that door open. Was that helpful?
It does help a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the patience while waiting for results.
I think you can also really preface it with, this works for me. If this doesn't work for you, let's explore other things. It may mean like, hey, would you be open to talking to someone else? Or do you want, is there someone else that you would feel comfortable talking to about this? They might have different solutions than me. It doesn't have to be a counselor, but it could just be, someone that they trust. Or if you were to ask them, like, who else would you want to learn from?
Again, in the era of working the way that we do, offering, like, people most likely know the solutions to their own problems. They just need a second to sit with it. Like, these teenagers are really intuitive and smart, and so they might not have the answer to the really big questions, but even being patient and exploring what possible solutions could work for them with them could be a really supportive way to keep that door open as well.
Could you expand on the role of siblings in the family? And I guess the other side of that, what if there are none? So as a parent, I think I'm over the top, and I compliment you on the one thing that I learned today is giving more space.
Yeah.
But it's hard when there are no other brothers or sisters.
Yeah. So it's something to normalize too is, like we said, okay, your teen may open up to siblings in that list of like other people they might turn to. They also might not really at all. Like I think a lot of folks that I work with, they don't feel comfortable. In fact, it can be a bit more challenging sometimes because as siblings, you're going to have very different experiences of your parents. I have a very different version of my mom and dad than my brother does. So sometimes we might think like, okay, well, siblings, how will that be helpful? But there's just probably so many other key people in your child's life that are people they're choosing rather than with their siblings, you don't get to really choose them. So I would kind of see, who else do they feel safe and comfortable with? Who else has like rapport with them and trust? Yeah.
We're all doing a really good job.
Yeah.
Like, that feels really important to claim here. You showed up, and I think, like, you've been curious and you've sat through us, sharing a lot of these new ideas with you. So I really, if that's the only takeaway, that's a big one. I'm seeing a hand in the back.
I'm wondering what your suggestions would be in approaching your daughter who has come to you and said, just so you know, this is what I'm looking at doing. She doesn't need your permission for it. She's being open, but you don't agree with what she was doing.
Yeah, you can certainly provide space for, do you want to hear what I think about this? And she might just say no, and that's can sometimes be the space that ends. But just even sharing that question could open her up, like, okay, maybe I am a little bit curious, and then maybe she will come to you later and kind of get your feedback. And giving that option is a different form of approach than just, oh, but actually, like, I think this, and this, because then she'll just do it anyway, maybe just to spite you, or, and then just maybe even, like, whatever she does, she has a negative association with that and with you, and then it prevents her from sharing with you in that regard going forward. So you could say, you know, explain your hesitation, explain why you maybe don't agree, but also maybe just take time for yourself to explore that first before you bring that to her, because you might make some connection with why it doesn't sit right with you, whatever it is, and maybe it's just something going on for yourself. And then if you try to separate from that why she's choosing it, or maybe her reasoning is something that you can like resonate with, or okay, I can see why maybe you would be interested in this, it could just help with your hesitation about it. Yeah.
I was 18 too. I got my nose pierced when I turned 18. I get that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But again, I think, like you mentioned, keeping that door open, because they're 18 now, but there's going to be a long, hopefully a really long amount of time after being 18 where they're wanting to flex their independence. You want to keep that door open so that they are able to come to you down the road as well.
And sometimes there is just like a deeper need of like wanting your approval, and I think maybe that could be why she even like opened that up to you in the first place. But knowing, okay, well, she might not like this, or maybe even just wanting a reaction out of you sometimes is the reason for doing or saying certain things. So yeah, kind of check where you're coming from, but then like Nicole said, she's only 18 now, but 25, 30, etc. going
I'd love some
forward.
advice now.
Yeah.
Yeah. so we're mindful of time. We'll pass it back over to
Well, I
Rosa.
just want to, well, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like, really, I think I speak on behalf of the room. Like it sounds so simple, and I'm going to go home and yell within 5 minutes. Like, so it's like, Rosa, let it sink in, have a long drive home, so, you know. But really, it's so good to thank you for normalizing our slip-ups. Thank you for, you know, your very intelligent, you know, thoughtful support and advice and, you know, giving context. And just for all the work you did to prepare and to share with us today, for being able to kind of receive these questions on the spot and give us little takeaways even there. So thank you, really. Very, very heartfelt and sincere thanks.
I also did want to say for our parents that are at St. Mary's Academy, we do have a wonderful student support team. So we have three great counselors. There is Dana Vivian in grade 7 and 8, Noelle Bowles in grade 9 and 10, and Holly Story in 11 and 12. But they're open to anyone at any time. So should your daughter need someone to speak with during the day as well, we're here. And even if you as a parent say, I don't know what to do, give one of them a call, reach out, we're here to help. Thank you for the Parents Guild for putting this on, it's wonderful. God bless you all. May you travel home to your lovely daughters and enjoy your time, and we welcome you back at any time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.